The lobby of the Grand Hyatt Seoul didn't just smell like expensive cologne and floor wax. It smelled like power. And Seo Jae-Min was the epicenter of it. Alessia Monroe sat at a corner table, her laptop screen dimming. She had exactly $114 left in her account and a folder full of evidence against Chairman Do Hyuk-jin that no one would touch. She was a ghost in a city of neon, an observer who saw too much and said too little. Then, she saw him. Seo Jae-Min. He moved like a predator who had forgotten what it felt like to be prey. But Alessia wasn't looking at Jae-Min. She was looking at his lead driver, a man whose hand had twitched toward his waistband 3 times in 60 seconds. A man whose holster was sitting 2 inches too high for a standard-issue security piece. Alessia didn't think. Thinking was for people with something to lose. She stood up. The 4 bodyguards shifted, hands hovering near their jackets, a wall of muscle closing in. Jae-Min stopped, his eyes, cold, dark, and unreadable, leveling on her. She didn't flinch. She stepped into his personal space, reaching up. The guards moved to intercept, but Jae-Min raised a single hand. Silence fell over the lobby. Alessia's fingers were steady as she gripped his silk tie, sliding the knot a fraction to the left. "Your driver has a gun that isn't his service weapon," she whispered, her voice a ghost of a sound against the roar of the lobby. "He's been checking the safety for the last 5 minutes. If you get in that car, you don't come back." She smoothed the silk one last time, looking him dead in the eye. "You look good, by the way. It would be a shame to ruin the suit." She turned and walked back to her cold coffee. Behind her, the world exploded into motion, but Alessia didn't look back. She had just traded her anonymity for a seat at the devil's table. 2 hours later, a man who wasn't the driver from the lobby approached her table. It was Kang Min-jae, the head of security. He didn't offer a greeting. He offered a heavy, cream-colored envelope. "Mr. Seo doesn't like leaving debts unpaid," Min-jae said. His voice was like grinding stones, logical, detached. Inside was a key card and an address in Seongbuk-dong, the fortress of Seoul's elite. It was also the primary hunting ground of Chairman Do Hyuk-jin. Alessia knew the risks. To enter Jae-Min's world was to become a target for everyone who wanted him dead. But she also knew that Jae-Min's network was the only one deep enough to reach the chairman. When she arrived at the mansion, the gates felt like the jaws of a trap. The house was a masterpiece of glass and shadow. Min-jae led her through the halls, explaining her role. She was to be the household manager, a cover that allowed her to observe every movement, every guest, and every ledger. "Why me?" Alessia asked as they reached the grand library. Min-jae stopped. "Because you saw a detail my entire team missed. In this house, we don't need more muscle. We need eyes that don't blink." She was shown to her quarters. It was minimalist luxury, overlooking a courtyard of raked gravel and ancient pines. On the desk lay a single document, the payroll for the household. Alessia scanned it. Her investigative mind began to map the connections. She wasn't just here to manage a house. She was here to build a case. That night, she stood by the window, watching the rain blur the lights of Seoul. She thought of Atlanta. She thought of Adrian, whose architectural dreams were now nothing but charcoal sketches in a psychiatric ward because he had seen too much of the chairman's construction frauds. "I'm coming for him, Adrian," she whispered to the glass. "I'm finally inside." Life in the Seo mansion was a study in the economy of cost. No one spoke more than necessary. No one moved without purpose. Seo Jae-Min was a man of strict routine. He rose at 5 a.m., took his tea in the library, and disappeared into a world of encrypted calls and high-stakes negotiations until midnight. Alessia quickly learned that his power wasn't based on violence, but on information. He was the vault of the city's secrets. She began her silent takeover. She didn't change the deco. She changed the flow. She noticed that Jae-Min suffered from silent migraines, the way he would press his thumb into his temple when the lights were too bright. She quietly swapped the high-wattage bulbs for soft, amber-toned LEDs. She noticed he never finished his breakfast because the kitchen prepared it too heavy. She ordered lighter, traditional fare. She never asked for a thank you. She simply existed in the periphery of his life. One evening, she found him in the library, staring at a blueprint. Not just any blueprint, it was a Do Hyuk-jin development. The chairman was moving into the shipping sector, a direct threat to Jae-Min's logistics empire. "You're looking at the wrong corner," Alessia said, stepping from the shadows with a tray of ginger tea. Jae-Min didn't look up. Am I? The structural load on the South Pier is impossible for the weight they're claiming to move, she said, setting the tea down. They aren't building a shipping hub. They are building a tunnel. A bypass for the customs house. Jae-Min finally looked up. For the first time, he didn't look at her like a variable. He looked at her like a partner. How do you know that? My brother was an architect, she said, her voice tightening. He taught me that buildings don't lie. Only the people who pay for them do. Jae-Min took a sip of a tea. It was exactly the right temperature. Stay, Alessia. I have a feeling the chairman is going to be very interested in you soon. Trust in Jae-Min's world wasn't a gift. It was a slow-growing debt. Alessia began to see the cracks in the untouchable king. One night, she entered his study to find him sitting in complete darkness. No phone. No documents. Just the silence of a man who had built a throne and realized he was the only person allowed to sit on it. Minute J says you've been digging into the Atlanta files, he said. His voice was weary, stripped of its usual command. I have, she replied, staying by the door. Chairman Du used a shell company to bankroll your competitors 5 years ago. He's been playing both sides of your empire since the beginning. Jae-Min let out a short, cold laugh. I spent a decade thinking I was the one holding the strings. It turns out, I was just the most expensive puppet. He stood up and walked toward her. In the half-light, the duality of his nature was visible, the cold strategist and the man who hadn't slept in 3 days. He stopped just inches from her. Most people backed away when Jae-Min approached. Alessia stayed grounded. Why tell me? He asked. You could have taken this to the chairman. He would have paid you millions to keep this quiet. Money didn't break my brother, Alessia said, her eyes burning. And money won't fix him. I want the chairman to see everything he built turn to ash. You're the only one who can strike the match. Jae-Min reached out, his hand hesitating before brushing a stray curl from her forehead. It was the first time he had touched her since the lobby. It wasn't a gesture of passion. It was a gesture of recognition. Be careful, Alessia, he whispered. The chairman doesn't kill his enemies. He deletes them. To understand the stakes, one had to understand the loss. Alessia spent her nights reviewing Adrian's old sketches. He had been a prodigy. He had designed a community center for the East Side, a place of light and glass. But the chairman's firm had partnered with him, used his designs as a front for a money laundering scheme, and when the authorities started sniffing around, they made Adrian the scapegoat. They didn't just take his career. They staged a break-in that left him with a traumatic brain injury. Now, the man who could visualize a skyscraper couldn't remember his sister's birthday. In the present, Alessia worked with Minute J. The security chief was a man of few words, but he respected competence. You're falling for him, Minute J said one afternoon as they monitored the mansion's perimeter cameras. I'm using him, Alessia corrected, her face a mask of iron. The line between the two is thinner than you think, Minute J replied, his eyes never leaving the screens. Jae-Min has lived in a world of mirrors for so long, he's forgotten what a real face looks like. Don't give him one if you plan on leaving. Alessia didn't answer. She looked at the screen and saw Jae-Min walking through the garden. He looked isolated, a figure of obsidian against the grey stone. She realized then that they were the same. Two people who had been forced to become weapons because the world had tried to make them victims. Communication in the Seongbukdong mansion shifted. It became a language of small, unspoken agreements. Jae-Min began leaving his door ajar when he was working, a silent invitation. Alessia began leaving notes on his briefings, small observations about the micro-expressions of his rivals during recorded meetings. The CEO of Hanshin Shipping is lying about the moja, she wrote on a yellow sticky note. He touches his watch every time he mentions the timeline. He's stalling for someone else. Jae-Min followed the lead. It led him to a hidden offshore account tied directly to Chairman Du. One rainy Tuesday, they sat together in the library. No work, just the sound of the rain. Jae-Min poured the tea, a reversal of their roles. Tell me about Atlanta, he said. She told him about the red clay, the heat, and the brother who used to draw buildings on napkins. She told him about the day the light went out of Adrian's eyes. I grew up in a container ship, Jae-Min said, his voice low. My father was a dock worker who died for a debt he didn't owe. I promised myself I would never owe anyone anything. But now. He looked at her. I think I owe you my life. Then don't pay me back, Alessia said. Just help me finish this. The chairman finally moved. It started with a security breach. A ghost signal appeared on the mansion's internal server. Minute J went into high alert, but Alessia realized it wasn't a hack. It was a beacon. Someone inside the household was signaling the chairman. She traced the signal to the kitchen staff, but it was a dead end. The real snake was higher up. Minute, stop the shipment to Busan, Alessia warned him as he prepared for a major deal. It's a setup. The chairman has leaked your route to the maritime police. He's going to have you arrested for smuggling his own contraband. Minute hesitated. His advisors told him to proceed. The profit was too high to ignore. Trust the eyes, Alessia said, standing in front of his desk. Not the numbers. Look at the signatures on the manifest. The D in the inspector's name has a serif. The real inspector is a lefty. He never uses serifs. Minute looked at the paper. He saw the tell. He cancelled the shipment. That night, the chairman sent a message. Not a phone call, but a delivery. A box containing a single architectural scale, broken in half. It was a clear signal. I know who she is. And I know what she's here for. The chairman's retaliation was surgical. A file arrived on Minute's desk. It contained bank records, photos, and encrypted emails. It showed Alessia Monroe meeting with the chairman's associates in Atlanta months ago. It showed $1 million transfer to her account. It was a masterwork of fabrication. To a man like Minute, who lived by the rule of logic, it was damning. Explain this, Minute said. His voice was no longer weary. It was the voice of the mafia kingpin, cold, sharp, and lethal. Alessia looked at the documents. She saw the trap. It's a lie, Minute. He's using my past to poison your present. The money is there, Alessia. The photos are real, Minute said, standing up. The space between them, once filled with unspoken trust, was now a canyon. Were you ever going to tell me you knew him? I told you I was hunting him, she shouted. Or were you hunting for him? Minute turned his back. Minute J. Lock her in the East Wing. No one talks to her. No one sees her until I decide if she lives. Alessia spent 3 days in the East Wing. She didn't cry. She didn't beg. She used a piece of charcoal from the fireplace to map out the chairman's entire network on the silk wallpaper. She was going to finish the job, even if she didn't survive it. Outside, Minute J was doing what he did best, observing. He took the evidence and ran it through a forensic digital sweep. He found the tell. The timestamps on the photos didn't match the shadows cast by the sun in Atlanta on those dates. They were deepfakes. He brought the report to Minute. Minute didn't say a word. He walked to the East Wing. He stood at the door, but he didn't open it. He couldn't. He had broken the one thing he had spent a decade trying to find, a reason to feel. He slid down the wall and sat on the floor, his head resting against the wood of the door. Alessia, he whispered. On the other side, she sat on the floor, too. Their backs were separated only by 2 inches of oak. I've spent my whole life waiting for the other shoe to drop, Minute said into the silence. I thought you were the shoe. But you were the only thing keeping me on the ground. I'm sorry. Open the door, Minute, she said, her voice cracking. We have a chairman to destroy. The end came not with a bang, but with a confession. Using the map Alessia had drawn on the wallpaper, Minute launched a multi-pronged strike. They didn't hit the chairman's men, they hit his reputation. They leaked the bypass tunnel blueprints to the international press. They released the logs of his fabricated evidence. By sunrise, Chairman Do Hyuk-jin was no longer an invisible architect of destruction. He was a fugitive. Weeks later, Alessia stood on the rooftop garden of the mansion. A letter sat in her hand. It was from Atlanta. Adrian had been cleared of all charges. A new architectural firm, anonymously funded by a logistics partner in Seoul, had offered him a position as a consultant for a new community center. Minute stepped out onto the roof. He wasn't wearing a tie. He looked human. The car's waiting, he said. Minute J can have you at the airport in an hour. You got what you wanted. Your brother is free. Alessia looked out at the city. For the first time, Seoul didn't feel like a city of glass and shadow. It felt like home. "I told you once that you look good in that suit," she said, turning to him. "But I think I prefer you without the armor." She didn't move toward the car. She moved toward him. "I'm not finished observing you yet, Seo Jae-Min." He smiled, a real, rare thing, and took her hand. The untouchable king was gone. In his place was a man who had finally learned that the most powerful thing you can do is let someone see you.